Hey, it's the Backlog, I'm the Explosion Wes, and this week I played Dawn of the Monsters by Way Forward. In it, a bunch of kaiju, giant monsters like Godzilla and King Kong for the uninitiated, are roaming the Earth, making a good chunk of it uninhabitable. To counter this, humanity enlists the help of Purple Ultraman, a large Metabot mecha, and two actual kaiju, a red angry Godzilla and crab monster that they keep under control somehow. For basic gameplay, this is a beat 'em up. You have a light attack and a heavy attack to beat down waves of enemies and make your way forward. You also have special attacks, which cost points from your special meter that you can use to give yourself an edge. You can also use these points to execute an enemy and regain a bit of health. You regain these points by wailing on your foes. You can also pick up parts of the scenery, like buildings and rocks, and use them to cave in enemies' skulls. You have a dodge and block, and doing these with perfect timing will give you advantages, like mitigating all damage and putting you in a good position to counterattack. The action is much slower than you would expect from the genre, and maybe, given how you're playing as big lumbering kaiju, this should have been more obvious than I'm giving it credit for, but it did come as a bit of a shock. And maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention to the instructions, but the combos also don't feel super dynamic. From what I could tell, my options were to either hit light attack over and over, or I could either press or hold the heavy attack to pull off different power moves. As normal for a beat 'em up, spacing and positioning is important since the enemies outnumber you, and letting yourself get surrounded can lead to them batting you back and forth between them, whereas corralling several of them can let you deal damage to multiple foes at once. For the most part, missions will consist of you either making your way through an area, taking out waves of enemies, or both. As you advance through the story, more and more types of monsters get thrown at you, giving you more patterns to learn and deal with. The penultimate mission typically consists of taking out a kaiju nest by destroying some fanged tentacles to open it up to attack, and then unloading while its defenses are down. And the last one consists of a boss battle, as you would expect. You get a rating based on how well you did in a particular level, and get rewarded with cards that you can then equip to the playable characters, each one having 3 slots to give them buffs during battle. I think there's a way to power up each card, but I did not manage to figure this out because I am dumb. You can also buy some permanent buffs, like HP, and alternate color palettes in the shop, and there's also gallery items you can view and extra conversations between the human characters you can see to fill out the lore. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This game really bores the heck out of me. The combat is too slow, the combos too simple, and the levels too repetitive. That said, I wouldn't call it a bad game, just one that doesn't suit my palate. Lots of other people seem to like this game, and I've seen a few interviews with the game's creators, and they're very passionate. What this personally comes down to is my preference. While I sometimes like quick-paced games and sometimes like to take my time, with beat 'em ups in particular, I want to be going fast. And while I do like monster movies, most of my experience with them consists of the 2 to 5 minute segments at the end of a Power Ranger episode where Rita makes her monster grow, so I'm not quite as nostalgic as a lot of people would be for this sort of thing. And as you can probably guess from what I said before, I also might not have given this game enough of a chance. There did seem to be some depth at least to the cards that I didn't take the time to learn, and maybe there was more to combat that, because button mashing didn't make it obvious, I just didn't pick up on. As it stands though, most of my time with the game consisted of me charging up a heavy attack and trying to time it so that it collided with an approaching enemy, sometimes using specials and objects to give myself an edge, and rarely using the light attacks, since they never seem to do much if any stun or knockdown. From what I can tell, there are 4 chapters, and I think I started looking for an excuse to put this game down sometime in chapter 2, though I'm not positive since I think I was partially keeping this a secret from myself. The first time I went up against the second boss, I thought I was done when it was several times faster than me and whooped my rear, but then I managed to beat it on my second try, much to my chagrin, and pressed on. A level or 2 after that though, I got wiped by a mere sub-boss twice in a row and took that as my excuse to see myself out. I wouldn't discourage anyone from giving this game a try, and wouldn't even call this a review so much as just describing my general experience with the game, but you probably do want to take in personal preferences before saying either yay or nay on this one. I also played the 2 Mega Man arcade games on stream, and since I won't be talking about them when I review the whole classic series, why not go over them here? First up is Mega Man: The Power Battle. In it, you can play as Mega Man, Proto Man, or Bass, and go through either a Mega Man 1 and 2, Mega Man 3 through 6, or a Mega Man 7 mode. Which one you choose determines what bosses you face, you having to contend with 6 Robot Masters, a Wily Fortress boss, and then Wily himself. The bosses get stronger the later you fight them, and to select a boss, you're shown 6 stages, with a cursor jumping around between them. If you happen to know who goes where and can kinda predict and hit select fast enough, you can kinda choose, but for most people, it's gonna seem sorta random. You can jump and shoot, as well as slide or dash, and when you clear a stage, you get a block of health back as well as the boss's weapon. Some of these will do more or less damage to some of the other bosses, but it can be kind of hard to tell what's best for who. Figuring it out would require either a guide or a lot of experimentation and intuition, and with how tricky it can be to swap mid-battle, a lot of times it's just better to charge and shoot to take out enemies, at least in my opinion. The game is pretty short, as you would expect, it taking around 10 minutes to finish a run. The big thing here is just competing for a high score and the fastest time, though if you get a game over and have to use a continue, your time won't be logged. The game is pretty neat and a good time. It's a good balance between arcade fighters and the Mega Man games proper, not requiring the memorization of a 20-button combo and needing to worry about getting beat down by a random challenger when you're just trying to learn the game, while being a lot more vertical with the jumps, not requiring you to learn and practice a level to get to a boss, and having a buster and varied weapons at your disposal. They're neat, if not always helpful. I would recommend this game to anyone if the power battle didn't have one major thing going against it, and that's the existence of its sequel, Mega Man: The Power Fighters. It's exactly like the last game, but more and better. First, you get Mega Man, Proto Man, Bass, and Duo to play with this time, and since more options are always nice, this makes this game better right off the bat. And sometimes in battle, to help you out, Eddie will show up and give you the option to summon Rush, Treble, or Beat, depending on your character. And while one of them are kind of a hindrance, the other 2 can be a huge help. There are 3 modes again this time: Find Wily, Retrieve the Secret Parts, and Rescue Roll. And while it's the same format as before, 6 Robot Masters, a Fortress Boss, and Wily, there's a few changes that I think are improvements. First, you can actually see who you have left to fight and choose who you go up against in what order, making it easier to plan a route. The weapons you gain also have clear advantages. The first time you use it on the boss it's most effective against, the game freezes and does a special effect on them, and then every few times it hits after that, it does the same effect and knocks them back. Not only does it make the weaknesses easier to figure out and learn, but it's also much more dynamic, feels more satisfying, and the sprite work is great. Rather than grouping bosses by game here, they're thrown together hodgepodge, making these weapon interactions even more fun to try and piece together, and does seem to add some variety for who you're queued up to fight. Your health bar is also a bit more nuanced, having more, but smaller sections for more specific damage, and you recover by grabbing power-ups the bosses drop after defeat, and sometimes they even do so mid-battle. Beyond all that though, the game just seems all around more refined. I didn't compare things side by side, but if you told me that some assets were recycled, I'd believe you. That said, the characters feel a bit better to play, the music and sound effects sound a bit nicer, and the sprites and background look more vibrant and clean. Both of these games are a low time commitment, easy to beat with enough persistence, and just all around fun that it's not hard to recommend them. However, with how much better the second game is, I would probably only encourage big Mega Man fans to pick up the Power Battle, whereas I suggest for general audiences to skip right to the Power Fighters. I played these games on the Anniversary Collection for GameCube, but as luck would have it, Capcom did just release both for modern consoles, for only $4 each. I might actually pick them up again myself, just because I like having things on the Switch. Oh, and I finished those illustrations I talked about a few weeks back. Well, maybe illustrations is the wrong word. They're more like rough concepts, giving my less than stellar drawing skills, but I think this gets the general idea across. I have a few ideas I want to play around with before I decide on a channel mascot and possibly commission someone to draw them a bit more competently, but for now, we finally have a channel banner. Thanks to my brother for throwing that together with what I gave him. For right now though, the backlog is at 107, for those keeping track. That'll do it for this week, so thanks for watching. Maybe consider subscribing if you like Mega Man or whatever the backlog series is supposed to be at this point, and perhaps I'll see you in the next one.